Americans found that the civil rights movement left them as poor as ever. And in post-war Britain, the issue of racism had also been moved onto the political agenda after race rioting at Notting Hill in 1958.
Something new and ugly raises its head in Britain: racial violence. An angry crowd of youths chases a Negro into a greengrocer's shop, while police reinforcements are called to check the riot.
You can get them all out of the country, and as soon as you can get them out, the better I'll be pleased, I'll tell you that.
By the mid-60s, immigrants from the Commonwealth and the colonies were arriving at a rate of 75,000 per year. This source of cut-price labour wasn't always welcome.
A Britain that had to face that while they had never thought twice about their right to be in a third of a globe, that when people from that third of a globe started turning up in Britain itself, in the heart of empire, that somehow they didn't belong.
Many black Britons welcomed the 1968 Race Relations Act, outlawing discrimination in employment and housing. But the Conservative shadow cabinet minister Enoch Powell attacked it in his infamous Rivers of Blood speech, making dire predictions about the consequences of immigration. He received over 40,000 letters of support.
The discrimination and the deprivation, the sense of alarm and of resentment lie not with the immigrant population, but with those among whom they have come and are still coming.
Once that speech had been given, it produced a fundamental shift, I think, in the thinking of black people around their feelings of belonging to the United Kingdom, their feelings of being loyal colonial subjects and then being abused in this way.
The newly formed National Front took up Powell's banner. Its membership rose to more than 20,000 by 1974.
The rise of the National Front in the 70s, that was a terrifying time if you were young. You had to be, if you were young and black, you had to be very fit, able to fight and run very fast indeed. I remember in our areas, in Oldham and places where I grew up, you literally had to jog through enemy territory. It was almost like some Hollywood movie, a gang movie. You were on your toes all the time, because if the skinheads came around the corner, you needed that half a yard advance on them to get away.
Madness. Madness. By the time of the 1976 Notting Hill Carnival, many black people had lost faith in the police force.
The communities were already on a war footing with the police by 76. Because the generation that I was from was saying to our parents, well, you may have put up with it, but we were born here, and we are certainly not going to put up with it. We are broadly politicised by the civil rights movements in America and the struggle against apartheid in South Africa. And so we are keenly aware of what our rights are, and we will not suffer to be oppressed. The policing of 76 was swamp policing. So we're already in this age where the mass deployment of officers to reclaim the streets. There was a battle to claim the streets. It was the police saying, this is our territory, we're the biggest gang, we run it, you are going to do exactly as we tell you to do. And there was black people saying, you're racist, you're attacking our young people have the right to defend themselves, we will not put up with your behaviour anymore. All that came together into a heady mix of marijuana, music and madness in Notting Hill Carnival in 76.
This is madness, man, I know I'm filled with gladness. It's gonna be rougher, it's gonna be tougher, and I won't be the one who's gonna suffer.
Very aggressive policing had been going on for very many years. You know, a group of young black men immediately being seen as threatening by the police as opposed to a group of young white men. People said no more.
For the next 5 years, relations between Black Britons and the police smouldered with resentment, until on the 10th of April 1981, the arrest of a young man under the so-called sus laws in Brixton, South London, sparked off a series of riots throughout Britain.
The fact that it was a shock to many people in British society just reinforces how many people just did not want to know what was happening around them, and that they turned a blind eye to intolerance, to injustice, and to police brutality.
In 1981, 30 riots occurred across Britain, from London, Liverpool and Leeds to Handsworth, Halifax and High Wycombe. The official report into the riots by one of Britain's most senior judges, Lord Scarman, identified poor social conditions as the problem, rejecting the idea of institutionalised racism within the police. But in 1993, when the 18-year-old student Stephen Lawrence was murdered during an unprovoked attack by a white gang in South London, the subsequent investigation came to a very different conclusion.
Nobody came and spoke to us. No police officer ever came and said, well, this is what's happened to your son or anything. The police on the night, they did nothing. So they gave Stephen no first aid. They never checked anything. They didn't put him in a recovery position. He fell like that, and they just left him there. And until the ambulance arrived. So even if they could have done anything to help him, they did nothing. From the moment that Stephen was killed, people came to our house giving names and addresses of who they believed to be the killer of Stephen. Those information was passed straight away to the police. We kept nothing back. Days that followed, they spent the time investigating us as a family, as far as they're concerned, that Stephen was black, so automatically he had to be in a gang, he had to have a criminal record, he had to have something. And that is not true, because you may have, I don't know how many percentage of families would be like that, but the large majority of black families are not like that. They're just like myself. So rather than investigate his murder, they investigated him.
For me, the central thing of the Stephen Lawrence tragedy was the failure of the legal system. And that history of failure is something that goes back before Stephen Lawrence was killed. It goes back to a period when black people became victims of crime and went to the police to speak of that victimage and to demand their help and protection in managing the risks and dangers involved. They were treated themselves as criminals.
While the police spent 2 weeks investigating the Lawrence family, his alleged killers disposed of vital evidence. Following the 1999 inquiry into the murder by Sir William Macpherson, institutional racism was identified as one of the reasons that Stephen's killers evaded justice.
The Macpherson report was an incredibly important document and still remains so in terms of getting white society in Britain to understand the fundamental dynamics of a phenomenon called institutionalised racism. And that is where you have no overt policy saying anyone is discriminated against, but that all the outcomes of your operations are overtly discriminatory. How do you get there? How does that happen? It's the culture of racism within an organisation that overpowers the formal commitment to equality that produces the racist outcomes. And we needed that phenomenon nailed, as that is exactly what happened during the case of Stephen Lawrence and very many other black people throughout the country.
It's widely believed that Britain has become a less racist country, yet black Britons are overrepresented in the economic underclass.
In some senses, today I think we may be going backwards, and the reason why I say that is because the scale of racial inequality over the last 20 years, from 1986 to 2006, has increased. Infant mortality rate for black people has increased. Educational failure rate for black people has increased generally across the country. Unemployment rates for black people have hardly shifted in 30 years, still incredibly high. Imprisonment rates are still very high.